Coffee Connections, my husband and I. Has anyone ever been to the coffee shop in Hilliard?
I can't open this door.
Yeah. Cool, right? Well, okay, first I want to check your listening ears, though, before we get too far. So everybody put your hands like this. Put your hands like this. We're going to clap once together. Ready? Not bad. Now, here's where I'm going to check your skills. I'm going to cross my hands, you clap. Got it? Try to clap together. Very good. All right, well, thank you for coming today. We're pretty excited to be here. We're going to talk about history. Do you know why history is important? Does anyone know why history is important? Why is history important? Yeah, you get to learn about what's done in the past. You can have a better appreciation. What else?
You could learn more if you're testing something about it.
Absolutely. That's always good. What do you think? Yeah, it's important to understand where we've been, to better appreciate where we're going, to learn our roots, to know what's in the future, and to just improve upon it, right? I'm a big fan of change. I think change is important, but you can't appreciate that change if you don't understand history. So this is my friend, this is Mr. Tim. He's pretty awesome. Has anyone ever been to the Historical Society, where like the red caboose is, downtown Hilliard? You ever been to the red caboose? Yeah. He and his friends are pretty awesome, and they're the people behind making that place happen. And so he's going to give us a little brief history about Hilliard in general, and then I'll talk more about Coffee Connections, and then we'll take questions.
And just so you know, we met last week, and they came up with a bunch of questions. I was just going to read them off and say who asked it.
Yeah. Oh, that's even better.
There was a lot that were the same. So
I like that.
I kind of like highlighted
That's
someone's.
a wise plan.
All right.
Perfect. All right. So he'll give you like a little brief introduction for about 5 minutes or so.
How many of you know when history was created, or when Hilliard was created? What year?
1854.
Okay, 1853 to 1854. Very good. And why was Hilliard created? What happened? What event happened? The trains came through, right? Yeah. Who was the founder of Hilliard? Amazing. He was Hilliard, and they named it Hilliard, right? But what happened was he was a train man. He worked with the train company, and he knew that they were going to put a new train track from Columbus over to Indiana. And so he bought some land where he knew the track was going to go right through. Today that would be illegal. It's called insider trading. But back then it was fair and legal, and so he bought the land right where the train track was going to go through, and that's when Hilliard began. Actually, the first train ride went through on July 4th, 1853. Yeah, July 4th, 1853. So, anyway, once the train track went through, there was a lot of businesses starting up in the Hilliard area, and Hilliard began to grow and to expand. It was all because of the train track going through. All right, so that was very, very important. We grew and grew and grew, and we had old Main Street. All of the buildings up and down Main Street in Hilliard grew from that, and those people were the ones who developed Hilliard, and that's where the history comes from. Some of the old buildings are still there, and a lot of them have been replaced with the newer buildings and all. So, how many of you know how many schools were built right on this property where this school is now?
I think about like 9.
No, 9.
2?
2? There were actually 5 different buildings here, and then they had extensions and stuff built on. But the first one was a log cabin, and it lasted for a little while, and then the second one looked just like this.
Lowercase.
Can you all see that? This was called the Wales School because a lot of Welsh people moved into this community. And so they built a school. And then that was in 1906. Then in 1931, the Old Hilliard Brown Elementary was built here. And it kind of sat at an angle facing the intersection. Okay? And that was in 1931. And then that was only a 4-room school, and I attended that school when I was in elementary school. All right? So that tells you how old I am. Yeah, I went to that school. And then after that, they added on to it. There was only 4 rooms, and I was there in the 6th grade, and we had the 5th grade girls and all of the 6th graders. The 5th grade boys were in with all of the 4th graders. That's how they would break it up, so they had 6 different classes in the 4 rooms. Then they built on a 1st grade and a 2nd grade, and then the other 4 rooms became 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. And after that, then they added on the 1st and 2nd grade. Then they tore down that old building and built this one on addition to that. So there were 5 buildings here on this property that were schools. All right? Pretty neat stuff. Very good. Now, Hilliard was a farming community. And the trains provided a lot of the stuff that the farmers needed. They would order it, they'd come in on the train, and then they would sell a lot of their products on the train and took them to other communities and all. So the train was extremely important. They called Hilliard the train town for a while, all right? All righty.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Kim. So we're going to tag team here. We'll talk a little bit more about Coffee Connections, and then we'll deep dive into questions where he's probably going to answer all of them because he knows so much. He's amazing. All right. So, Coffee Connections. Coffee Connections, we took over that building in the fall of 2016. Does anybody, how old were you guys in 2016? It was a while ago, right? It was a while ago. But before that, for a whopping 15 months, it was Solar Cafe, which is how we got to know. How many of you have ever been to the splash pad? Yeah, I love the splash pad. Well, I'm specifically talking Hilliard. Pretty much anything we're talking today is going to be Hilliard. So, in 2016 that opened, we were on a coffee cart. And have you ever gone to food trucks? Yeah. Right? Food trucks are pretty sweet. Well, in order for food trucks to be able to be at like public places, they have to win what's called bids. So you have to like fill out paperwork and put it in the city, and then you got to get it approved. And we did. We got approved to be at the splash pad. Well, across the street there was this cafe, and our name is Coffee Connections because we like to make. I know, amazing, right? And so we didn't want to cause any problems. So Nate, my husband, decided he'd go talk to that coffee shop owner, and because we didn't have like tea or something, we thought maybe we could buy something from him, or partner, because we're always better together. I'm a big fan of making partnerships. You can go a lot further together than you can by yourself. And so we went there, and can I be honest? We were really scared because we're doing something new. Like, what if this guy would have been like angry? Because like here we are, we're gonna sell, kind of compete against him. But you know something really cool about Hilliard that I've come to know, because I haven't lived here.
How about this G?
Hilliard? Well, people are nice in a lot of places, but Hilliard really likes to do things together. They really like to band together. And so, anyway, my husband had this meeting, and we were like super scared. But guess what happened? He actually offered to sell us his business. I know, that's crazy. We didn't have the money. There's a lot of stories there. We can talk about that another time. But that's when we took over in the fall of 2016. And then that's when I met Lucas Perez, because I met his parents then. Pretty cool, right? I've known him for forever. I know, right? I met him that fall at the coffee shop. He's good friends with my daughter, Addie. It's cool. Anyway, so here's the deal, though. We're going to talk a little bit more about history. So our building, we decided, my husband was curious. He was like, what's going on? And so he met with people at the Historical Society. He did some research. Did you know something? How many of you have an address? Like if I wanted to mail you a card, I could write an address. How many of you have an address? Yeah. It's pretty cool, right? Well, you think, did you want to know something cool? buildings didn't always have addresses. What? I know. It was shocking to me too. But before they were just like lots or plots. Like it was just different. And so there isn't a whole lot of history about our building at 4004 Main Street before 1921. It existed before then, but there's just not any documentation. And guess what happened in 1921? It got an address. That's what happened. It got an address, and there started being records, so we could find out what happened. I will take your questions in a minute. So in 1921, we got an address, and it is 4004 Main Street, Hilliard, Ohio. Pretty cool, right? And then it's been a lot of different things, and I might have some of my details foggy in terms of order, but over the years, it was a bakery, it was a bait shop. Does anyone know what a bait shop is?
Where you get bait?
It is a fish store, but what is bait for?
To catch fish and like.
Wait just a second, I call on this friend over here. Just a second. What is it for? Yeah, I know. Because it's where you go. Yeah, so it was like a bait and tackle shop. Most of the time, the people that had these shops, they lived on the upstairs, and the shops were downstairs in like the front room. You've been inside Coffee Connections? You know the bar where you go to order?
I go there a lot.
I'm so cool. Yeah, me too. I'm there all the time. That bar where you go to order, that whole part of the building didn't exist in 1921. Oh no, I don't know when it got added because again, sometimes documents aren't always clear, but it wasn't there originally. Here's a really cool thing. Have you guys studied the wars at all? Like the Great War or World War II? Yeah. Well, during the war, one of the ways that people back here in the States could help is they could take rations. Does anybody know what rations are?
They're food that you store in containers, and they don't like expire. And you can eat them.
Yes, that's part of it. What else is a ration?
It's using military.
That's part of it. You're not wrong. So here's let me give you some details. There's not a lot to go around. Since everybody was helping send stuff to the war, we had limited supplies here. So a little while ago, we had this shortage of toilet paper. Does anybody remember this? Yeah. People were just buying it like crazy. Well, to avoid that kind of thing, everybody wanted to help. They wanted to band together, and they would take rations. So they'd be like, this week I can buy flour, but next week I can buy sugar. And they would ration it out at home. Rations. Well, you had to go somewhere to pick up your rations. Guess where that was for Hilliard? No! Crazy, right? It was the ration station during one of the wars, which I think is pretty cool. Also, like deep dive murder mystery. I don't know all the details, but it also was a crime scene at one point.
Really?
No, crazy, right? Crazy. But
know that.
it's got a wide history. And so our building turned 100 years old when? So when did it turn 100?
Guys. 2021.
There you go, 2021. And so we were planning to do this huge kind of celebration, but it didn't happen. There were other things happening. Well, we put out some balloons and made a post online. But that's where we were at. What we could do. But it's really cool, the wide history, because it adapted and it grew and it changed and it appreciated where it was at, but it was able to adapt to the needs of the growing town around it. Because the train station, from what I understand, Mr. Tim, is where the splash pad was. Is that correct? And so the coffee shop was pretty ideally located, right, by the splash pad. So that's why it made a great place for people to stop and sell and interchange with the goods coming and going from the train station. Okay, I feel like I might have forgotten something because I'm pretty good at rambling. But let's head to the awesome question.
Yeah, so one of the questions that kind of goes with what you've been saying, Brady wanted to know, what are your career goals?
Oh. Great. Fun fact, when I was your age, guess what I wanted to be?
What?
Take a guess.
A coffee owner.
Not a coffee shop owner.
What? Artist?
Teacher. Teacher.
Oh, I was gonna do something that I wanted to do.
Yeah, but teacher, and I was a teacher. I used to teach kindergarten, in fact.
I was supposed to say that.
Crazy, right? It wasn't a hard time, but then I had 4 kids, and then we moved here, and and we decided, we felt like we were called to open a coffee shop. And fun fact, neither Nate nor I drank coffee when we opened Coffee Connections. Right? Crazy. But we wanted to have a place that was welcoming to the community, where all people can feel welcomed and valued and loved, and could be a place where you could meet new people and make connections. And now we drink a lot of coffee. Well, a lot of coffee.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So in terms of career goals, we just want to be keeping a place that loves their neighbor and serves our city. That's really it.
What's your favorite part of your job?
Meeting people. I like to talk. Fun. I like to meet people.
One of the students, June, wants to know, you have 2 stories. What happens upstairs at Coffee?
It's just space for meetings. I've met Mr. Tim up there from time to time. We've planned good ideas for the Hilliard Historical Society or the gift shop. We've met up there. And then he hosts different meetings with different people.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. There's also a bathroom upstairs. Bathrooms are important. Yeah.
I think you answered a lot of the questions that the students had.
Oh, okay.
Lillian wants to know what kind of food you have.
Yeah. We don't have just
What
coffee.
about donuts?
On Saturdays, we get donuts from the Little Donut Factory. So remember that thing about our name? I know, Coffee Connections. We partner with 16 different businesses. I know, it's crazy, right? So we get our donuts on Saturdays from Little Donut Factory. We get our bears from Bears Bagels. Does anyone have a Bears bagel? So good, right? Corey's Confections makes our scones. Another lady makes our croissants with have chocolate in them. The only food we make on site, like what we make our breakfast sandwiches, you know, we get the breads from other people, which are probably our favorite thing, is our overnight oats. Does anyone ever have overnight oats? They're really good. You don't like them? Give yourself some time. Your taste buds will change. Yeah, they're good. So we make those on site. But yeah, we have all kinds of pastries and breakfast sandwiches. Any other questions?
I think you've covered most of it. Yeah,
Good.
thank you so much.
All right, so now I'm going to turn it to you guys. We covered most of your questions, but we've got Mr. Tim here too. We've got lots of info.
Yeah, I have a whole other
for
section
him.
of questions
For
for
him.
him.
Oh, perfect. All right, well then I'll just pass it on back to him.
Let me add additional
Yeah, more info.
for a Coffee Connection. Right next door is an empty lot where they put in some seats and all where people could go outside and sit.
Yeah, our patio.
That used to be a house that was converted into a store. And the lady who lived in the Coffee Connection building also ran that store. And you could go in there and buy convenience items, that sugar and flour.
Kind
And,
of like a gas station.
yeah,
convenience store.
canned goods, candy bars, those kinds of things. And it was a place where the kids coming from the Hilliard Elementary School, which used to be over where the Innovative Learning Center is now, the hub for the ILC. That used to be the elementary school area, and they would stop by there on their way home and get candy bars.
Who knows where that Walgreens is? It's the building behind Walgreens. That's the one he's talking about, right? So they would walk on down.
Well, it's
And the one across the street.
the one across from the Dairy Queen was the elementary
So
school.
that's the 6th grade.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
What is the oldest building in Old Hilliard?
The oldest building in Old Hilliard now, I believe, is the Winteringer building, which is Odie's, right on the corner of Center Street and Main Street, where the splash pad is, all right?
The
And
one
they,
with the big
yeah.
patio bed.
yeah, the big upstairs patio and all that, and then they put in the other buildings attached down there called the Crooked Can.
Oh, I told
Yeah.
a lot. We just go coffee connections.
You know, the Winteringer building, which is Odie's, it was right next to the railroad. So the railroad was the one that started Hilliard. So that's naturally the first major building. And it used to be a clothes store and a shoe store. It had all kinds of businesses in there throughout the years. But it started out, they called it a dry goods store. You could buy things. When I was a kid your age, I used to go there to get my shoes that I would wear to school in. so I knew Mrs. Esther Wintermere, and her original name was Seifert, and she played the piano in where the Crooked Can is now. There used to be an old auditorium where they showed silent movies, and she played the piano for the silent movies.
Do you guys know what silent movies are?
No.
I mean, you can deduce that there is no audio, right? But it used to be that films couldn't. You know how? Who's been to the movie theater? Yeah, it's pretty awesome, right? They dim the lights. There's this booming sound. It's cool. Well, that didn't exist back then. Were they color or black and white? Were they still?
Black and white.
They started black and white, and so it's just black and white, and there's no audio. But this Miss Esther would play the piano to go along with it. There was like music. How many of you play music? Anyone take music lessons? It's super cool. Love that. That's pretty awesome.
Okay, and
Next question.
This is from Winston. He wants to know if there's still a train track underneath the splash pad.
no. I pulled up the train track when the trains quit running through Hilliard, and the reason is they made the rails to trails. Have any of you ever walked down the rails to trail? Okay, so when Hilliard got title to that land from the railroad, they took up the railroad tracks and the railroad ties that the tracks laid on, and made it rails to trails so people could walk or ride their bicycles.
Delaney would like to know, why did they get rid of the train tracks and the trains?
As the city grew and all, the reason the train tracks came through this area was because Hilliard was a farming community. And all the farmers would bring in their grains to the grain elevator, the Russell Grain Company, which was right where the splash pad is now. And they would bring in their corn, their oats, their wheat, their soybeans, and they would sell them there. And they used these big train cars to carry those to Chicago and other areas to sell. Also, right across the street was the Hilliard Lumber Company. And they got their lumber from the trains that came through. Well, after they closed down the grain company because so many farmers moved out, as Hilliard grew, they bought the farms up and made them into housing additions. And so the farmers were moving further and further away, and it wasn't profitable anymore for the trains to operate through Hilliard. Okay, so that was the reason.
Well, and think about it. 100 years ago, when our coffee shop was officially started, for 1921, we'll say, did everybody have cars? No. Does everybody have cars now?
Yes.
Not
everybody.
Okay. All right, but often, but you guys can't drive them yet, so you're not 16. We'll go with that. But here's the deal.
Yeah, we don't have cars.
We talked about change in progress, right? So back when Hilliard began in the 1800s, train was the primary mode of transportation for our whole country. The train is still an important mode of transportation for our country, but it's not the primary mode of transportation. Now there are cars and planes. Golf carts are pretty awesome. I'll give you that. But so with that in mind too, as the people moved away, the train didn't need to go through downtown Hilliard anymore. It still goes through Hilliard. In fact, I was almost late taking my older kids to school because I got stuck behind a train. So the trains still work here. They just don't go the same path there.
One more. Did John Reed Hilliard actually build the homes in Old Hilliard?
No. And interesting, John Reed Hilliard, the founder of Hilliard, never even lived in Hilliard.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I use it.
Yeah, he did not ever have a house that he lived in Hilliard. And what he did was he took the property that he bought and he broke it into different plots, like the one she was saying there at 4021 or 4004. That was a plot or a lot number. But he would sell off the lots to people, and so he did not live there though.
Do we know how much those plots cost back then?
Not very much with today's money, but I don't have a.
It was a shockingly low number.
I think that for the church that's on the corner of Main and Norwich, he sold that lot to the church people for $5. But they were a church. I think for the houses and stuff, they were a little bit more than that. Now it'd be $20,000-$30,000 for a lot or something.
I feel like, I can't definitively say this, but I was thinking $25 is what we read one time, which makes sense if he gave the church it for $5, then he gave it to this family for $25. Which doesn't feel like a lot of money today, but back then you'd work like a whole day and maybe make $1, so it's still a lot of money, you know?
Yes, sir. Wait a minute, everybody.
Say that a little bit louder, friend.
The owner's still alive?
Oh, John Hilliard? No, unfortunately, I'm pretty sure he's no longer alive.
No.
But when he died of age. It happened.
This is a long time ago, guys.
I don't actually know when John Hilliard passed away. I'm sure.
But he moved over to Illinois. He lived in Illinois when he passed away.
That's somebody in Illinois.
Oh my goodness. You, sir.
Did train plans built Hilliard?
Plans?
Yeah, his plans to build Hilliard.
I don't really think that the trains brought them, but they for sure brought the lumber, the wood, the supplies. But ingenuity comes from the people who live here, right? Yeah.
For how many years did you teach kindergarten before opening the coffee shop?
Okay, so I taught kindergarten for 2.5 years, and then I subbed for 5 years when we lived here.
How many of you like math? I taught math for 2 years down in Cincinnati in an all-girls school.
Miriam.
All right.
Friends, listen up.
How old am I? Let's take a guess. How old do you think I am?
82.
58.
Oh, that was
80.
Oh, wait. Raise your hand. If you think, let's do it this way. If you think he's in his 50s, raise your hand. If you think he's in his 60s, raise your hand. If you think he's in his 70s, raise your hand. If you think he's in his 80s, raise your hand. All right, Mr. Tim.
78 years old. And I lived in Hilliard in this area for 78 years. I was born in Sandusky up by Lake Erie, but I moved here with my family when I was 6 weeks old. So I've lived in Hilliard ever since.
Whoa. I was born in Ohio.
How
That's a
big?
great question. How big is Hilliard? Friends, I know you've got some good questions, and you've been awesome listeners, but let's be respectful here.
In feet? Oh boy, I had no idea. They don't measure in feet, they measure in square miles, possibly. But I cannot answer that one.
I bet we could research that.
You guys, you should write that down as a question to research. And something to note is that Hilliard proper is going to be different than the size of our school district, because you can come to Hilliard City Schools and live in Columbus. It's weird because it gets all tangled, you know, when you look at a map. Question for you.
How did you come up with the idea
How did I come up with the idea? That's a good question. You want to know? So at the time, my husband and I were living in Pennsylvania. We lived, oh, I'm so sorry. We lived out near Philadelphia. Anybody ever been to Philadelphia?
No, but I've seen the show.
You've seen the show? That's
Had a good cheese
you know all
steak.
about it. And so I had 2 children at the time, and we had another friend, and they had 3 kids, and it was like later in the evening, and we wanted to go have coffee, and we wanted to grab coffee somewhere. Okay, to be clear, I didn't drink coffee. I wanted to get a hot chocolate, but we wanted to go, but there was nowhere good to go with our kids, and so then that's when we had this idea that we felt like it'd be really cool if there was this family-friendly coffee shop that was a welcoming place, and that's where the idea came from. Yep. Okay, question for you.
If when it was first made, would it be like how old would it be if it? How old is Hilliard like from the first day?
Well, you got to do math. We talked about math a minute ago, right? question? Go ahead.
So it was Hilliard was in 1858.
53. So you gotta do some math. So we'll be 200 years old in 2053, but it's not 2053 yet. So we're getting close to like 175 years old. That's just an estimate.
171. 171. There you
Bingo.
go.
Excellent. Okay. We'll do a few more. We're okay on time. Can we do a few more questions?
Sure.
Okay. All right.
If there is no addresses, how would people know where to go?
That's a great question. Here's the crazy thing. People just knew each other. They knew all their neighbors. There would be an awesome man like Mr. Tim who would be out and about, and you'd stop and you'd ask him where to go, and you'd say, hey, do you know where Johnny lives? And he'd be like, yeah, Johnny lives behind the granary. And then they'd tell you how to get there. It's kind of crazy, right?
What's your favorite thing? What's your favorite thing to get?
Oof, tough question. I drink an almond milk mocha every day. That's my favorite drink. That would probably be the answer to that. An almond milk mocha. No, you're writing that down. Okay, so what's your question?
So it's like the exact age of Coffee Connections about like 104?
The building?
Like
Yes,
how old
the-
the building?
Okay, yes, so the building where Coffee Connections live and Coffee Connections don't share the same age. Coffee Connections is like 8 years old. It's kind of a baby. But the company has only existed for a little time. But the building where it is like 104 years old. Yes.
Hands like this.
Back there.
Don't swing. You'll get hurt.
How many customers go on Coffee Connections a day? I honestly don't know the answer to that. You would think that is something I know. Our busiest day of the year is July 4th, which I did not realize was our birthday for the city, which is kind of cool, you know, when we were talking about that. So July 4th is by far our busiest day. Does anyone know why it would be our busiest day?
Because it's like a parade.
It's the parade, and I've got an audience, a captive audience. That's awesome. Okay. Okay, if you've answered a question already, put your hand down, because I want to try to get to my friends who haven't, and you all look really familiar. Friend in the Flintstone shirt, what's your question?
Yes. How much jobs did the both of you have?
How many jobs did I have?
How many what?
Well, let's see, I used to work at a pizza shop and a cafeteria, and then I taught, and I subbed, and I nannied for a hot second, and now I'm at the coffee shop.
Didn't know how to
I've had 5. I started out, I went to the University of Cincinnati, and after I finished up there, I wanted to get my master's degree there, so I taught school. That's where I taught all-girls school. I taught freshman algebra. So that was my first job. Then I came up and I worked as a systems analyst for an international company in Hilliard, or in Columbus, called Ranco. And then I went to the Miller Paving Company. And then I went to the Shelley Company. Shelley, yeah.
Our turtle's name is Sharon.
Okay. And then I drove a school bus for Hilliard for 10 years.
That's a brave job.
Favorite places in Old Hilliard.
I feel like it's really biased if I say coffee.
Yeah.
Other than
You know, one of my favorite spots, honestly, is the Red Caboose. I think it's so cool. And my grandpa was obsessed with trains, so I really love, he's no longer alive, but I really love that we have quite a heritage of trains.
That is at the Historical Society's village, where we have the museum and the train station and the caboose and all the.
I'm a big fan of Rita's ice cream. Rita's water ice. Did you have a question in the back? Front?
I did.
Yeah.
You want to ask him first, though?
Perfect, go ahead.
what is your main goal in college?
What is my main goal? Honestly, to love people. I just love people, and I want to be a great place where I can get to know people. Yeah.
I have 2. First one is, what is something that all of us should know about Coffee Connections that is maybe like,
Insider info.
yeah, like something special that, other than making connections with people, that makes, like if we walked in, we were like, this is why it's Coffee Connections.
Okay.
part. We roast our own coffee, which is kind of unique. We were voted Columbus's best coffee shop last year, which is kind of cool for what we are. So that I think makes it. We put a lot of effort into our drink recipes, so we don't taste like Starbucks on purpose. But that's a good thing. Starbucks broad drinks main wide, but we don't want to have that much sugar in our drink. So we make a lot of our own recipes in house, and Nate makes all of our own blends and single origins. He does all the roasting. That's us.
Awesome. And then the other one is, what is something special that a lot of people from the area would not know about?
One thing is that we have a historic village with a museum and many original Old Hilliard area buildings. You'd be amazed at how many people said, I didn't even know that the historic village was here. It's hidden off next to the Franklin County Fair, but if you're not going off of Main Street, you don't see it. So that's one of the things that we really try to improve on, is to getting people to know that the historic village is there with all of the history of Hilliard.
Which, fun fact, when he says like original buildings, like they moved them, like from other places in Hilliard to that space. And if you've been to like the Ohio History Village, which is really cool, they're replicas. They're not real buildings. They were built to look like it.
How many people know where Mudsock is? Mudsock. You know Mudsock? Is what?
It's about a mile down the road.
Yep, it's about a mile down the road. Mudsock was the intersection of Roberts Road and Alton Darby. There used to be an old country store there, and the church that we moved into the historic village came from Mudsock. All right.
All right, I think we have time for like one more question here.
Kind of going with what you were saying, how many historical buildings are there?
We have multiple historic buildings that are on the National Register of Historic Buildings. Odie's is one. The church on Main Street is one. The old Bag of Nails is one.
I've been there.
And where the Montgomerys live, there's a house just on Norwich Street that is on the National Register of Historic Buildings.
Well, Mr. Woodruff, can I plug that in May, he's going to be taking people on a walking tour of Old Hilliard on May 18th. So you can learn about all of those buildings with Mr. Woodruff. Actually, we might be doing something like that before. Surprise, surprise, something coming up. There might be a trip for all of you into Old Hilliard. I don't know the details yet, but I've heard some rumblings about a possible trip for all of you.
All right.
Yeah. All right.
What's this? Tiny.
Yeah, oh, thank you so much, both of you.
That was our pleasure.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. I feel like they took a lot of great notes, so I can't wait to see the paragraph that they come up with. About
Me
the history
either.
of the building.
I'm excited too.
Oh, we will need, boys and girls, we will need to like talk to you at some point about how you would like your caboose design. Like, I don't know if we talked with Sam much about that.
Briefly, no.
But basically, every location of the scavenger
Boys and
hunt
girls.
will have a train caboose, whether it be painting or like if you could think about where you would hide something like that in your space, and then whether you would want it to be something that's a physical object that people would find, or a painting that someone would find on the wall.
I would love a physical object. And if you painted it to be a mural kind of thing, like even if you wanted to put like coffee beans or any of the elements that we talked about today, I'd be game. But honestly, we love kids' creativity because my husband was a kids pastor before, so we do puppets and stuff. That's just what we do. So whatever you guys come up with, we'll love.
So something physical and something that has a coffee paint to it.
Yeah, we'd love that.
Awesome.
And, all right, what's your question?
In what year was the building made?
The building, okay, so that's what we're talking about. We're saying 1920, 1921. The because that's when records started to come. So we're not entirely certain of when it was actually voted.
What happened? I unknotted it. It's easy to unknot it.
There we
Can I unknot it?
There we little people. No,
We
I'll
can't
let people know.
unknot the string.
Wow.
It's smart.
Me too.
Not only that. The stroke choking on your head. Mine, they're not
No, no, not the ones that we're talking about that started the town. Those ones are not. There are trains that go through, close to that now. It changes, but our house specialty is the brown sugar cinnamon latte.
All right, boys and girls, thank you so much. We gotta get back to class.
Yeah, oh, they're never gonna stop. And it's gonna be like the end of the same
Our pleasure. It is. It is from Water Connection. All right. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you.
You're like 50?
Have a good day, everyone. We'll see you.
Mrs. Tice, do you wanna go first since you've been sitting the longest? Oh, okay, so it's us first. Okay, my class, stand up, please. Okay, let's go. Riley, go. Take notes.
I took a whole bunch of notes. I took like
Hey, Kaylin, go ahead and go back and sit in your seats. Go ahead, Riley, sit in your seat.
I wrote too much.
Stand up, guys. Follow them out. Follow.
He's darling.
Huh? He's adorable.
No, it doesn't
I cut one.
Hey guys, people are learning, so as soon as we get out, we have to have voices on.
What is your China restaurant then? Get back where you were. I was here.
A lot of the questions that the coffee connections person answered,
Follow you back to class. Oh, I gotta stop this recording.